Okay, so this is a quick Boomy guide since not many people have been getting very good resources on Boomy lately, and there's a lot to go on with Boomy and War Within. We're kind of set to a few builds, so people tend to just gravitate towards a single one, especially with Korkiri doing well in the European AWC, so I thought I'd give a rundown of what's going on. Boomy right now is probably one of the best wizards in the game for every kind of content. But I mean, you have the other things like Devastation's really good. Shadow Priest is insane, obviously. I mean, Shadow Priest won um, the North American Cup, and I think realistically, you probably were going to see it in EU as well if it needed to come out. But I think Boomy's the most well-rounded wizard right now. It's very strong when it gets to play, but it's also very weak when it comes to being kind of trained. It struggles with a lot of melee right now, and that's, I think, the big issue, is just surviving is the problem. But we'll just kind of run down the quick things. So first things first, obviously my gear is not optimized. I'm still grinding out Conquest since the Conquest cap just released today, and we could finally grind it out. So, I mean, I'm making a few big changes. I still play 4-piece. I think it's very nice. To each their own. I tend to prefer the mastery you get from your legs and chest, but it's up to you. Most people will just play 2-piece with just your hands and shoulders. But for pretty much every other piece, you want to just go haste first as much as you can. You want to get as much haste as possible. So you see I'm sitting about 20% haste right now. This will probably go up by about 4, maybe 5% more once I'm finished. I mean, I'm looking at replacing 2, maybe 3 more pieces if I'm feeling it. I'll be like crafting the neck here. I'll be crafting my wrists next, and then I'll be replacing my chest and legs with just standard PvP haste first pieces, and of course the same with my helmet. That's kind of your general best in slot, just to have haste first and everything. There are a few differences in what people run. For instance, I play the warmongering boots, and I know like Korkiri and whatnot play the warmongering offhand. It's slightly more versatility, but a little bit less haste. I think it's more just you kind of play to what you feel like you enjoy. If you need the damage reduction, go for verse. If you don't, then haste is your best option. You can always throw a bit of mastery in there if you're wanting. It's never bad. Embellishments. I've been kind of playing around with a few embellishments. There's a few things you can play. For instance, I do the same thing that Korkiri does on EU. I play Authority of Radiant or Authority Ascension for your main hand, or whatever crafted piece you want to put it on, doesn't really matter. And then I also just double down with that with the Embrace the Darkness. I know there's a few others, like Supatees will play, what's it called? The shield that you get when you drop below, I think, 30% health. I think it's okay. If you have survivability issues, it can definitely keep you alive. But I think that a 450k shield is not going to be game-breaking. And coupled with that is that specific embellishment. It requires you to gem multiple different types of gems to get the maximum benefit out of it. And the reality is, and where do I have a gem? I can just find it real quick. I have it somewhere in here. Maybe it's on another ring. Yeah, there it is. You know, you're going to have precog as your one red gem, and then the rest you're going to do is probably either verse major, haste minor, or haste major, verse minor. For the rest of your gems, you don't really want to deviate from that. Everything else just sucks. My gear, as I said, is not optimized, so I can't really show it all. I'm kind of lazy and I don't really play. But the gearing is pretty straightforward. As for actual talents and whatnot, we have 3 kind of builds. One of them is your standard build, where you're just playing Keeper of the Grove and you're just setting up every 30-45 seconds really, and you just want to do big bang goes with your dream bursts. But then there's 2 other ones that I kind of came up with, and one of them I actually think is maybe more consistent than the Keeper of the Grove. But we'll go over it from start to finish. So this is your standard build, Keeper of the Grove. This is something that I have optimized a little bit with a little bit of help from doing some research. But your Druid talent trees are going to pretty much stay the same for every spec. The only thing you maybe switch out of every once in a while is you drop Ursoc's Spirit, Innervate, is like the 2. I mean, you can get rid of Ursine Vigor if you prefer the just flat 10%, but you need the talent chain here. If you really want to keep Innervate, you can just get an Ursoc Spirit and Well-Honed Instincts, and you can either put it in Rake and Feline Swiftness, or just Rake if you want the stun. If you need Decurse, Rejuvenation, Remove Corruption, those all both work for you. I personally stay here standard. I find very, very few situations where Remove Corruption's actually decent. I know you'll probably hear from everybody else, so you need to play this into every Warlock or every Shaman or whatever, but I also believe that if you're losing the game to a Hexed spell, you're going to lose the game anyways. If you're dying to a Warlock, stopping their 1 curse every 8 seconds honestly isn't going to change the game. They're going to get it out, they're going to kill you regardless. It's not how you lose the game, it's a slowdown for nothing. But those are your changes. I know there's one thing that Korkiri does, actually, and this is his talents page, is he will actually drop Well-Honed Instincts, and he'll go into Forest Walk. So, this is actually not the worst thing. I think it has a lot of viability, but I think you have to play with very specific healers. Namely, he plays with the Preservation Evoker for the most part, so that it kind of explains it. But this combos really well with Protective Growth. Obviously, if you have Regrowth on you, you take 8% less damage. It's very nice. So you also get 8% more increased healing, and you get a bit of movement speed, so it's very nice. I don't like this talent personally, but to each their own. If I was going to have that slot, I'd just go into Improve Stamp Roar. I know some Druids play Fluid Form. I don't understand why, personally. You have to Wrath to get into it, which is just bad. You don't really want to cast Wrath if you don't have to. So this is just the standard page. Keeper of the Grove, these are going to be your standard talents. On the choice tree, you don't really get a choice. You don't need your Trents to live. Your Astral Power gain is nice, but we already have a lot of AP gain, so it's not too big. And then having a shorter Force of Nature cooldown puts Force of Nature on a 45-second cooldown, so comps like Boomy Rogue, Boomy Demon Hunter, Boomy Shadow Priest, Boomy Warrior, even Boomy like Ellie, suddenly become a lot more lethal because you have more opportunities to win. As for your other talents, you can kind of go whichever one you feel like here. I personally go Potent Enchantments, and the reason is Whirling Stars reduces your Incarn by 10 seconds. So that puts your Incarn at a 1.5 minute cooldown flat. This gives you a lot overall, because Whirling Stars already takes it off by 90 seconds. And now you get 2 charges, so instead of a 3-minute cooldown, Incarn is now 2 by 1.5. Lets you just pump things out every minute and a half, even though you only get half the duration. The only other change in here is here. You can kind of make this choice. I play Control of the Dream. It just makes Incarn slightly come back faster. So it's nice. But there's a world where you do go Power of the Dream, I think. Especially if you're like a big Boomy Demon Hunter player, I would assume. Is probably your best composition for this. Just gets you a little bit more of a punch. And it's very nice. But as for your talents, the actual balance tree, your talents are pretty straightforward. With Keeper of the Grove, you need Force of Nature. It's not like a negotiation. You have to have this talent. It's like the core of Dream Surge. You need it. It lets you just pump. You don't use it off cooldown of the wave. You just throw it out because you can. Like, you don't just do this. You don't just send them out to do your damage. You want to combo this with your actual burst, but we'll go over that in a minute. Talents are pretty straightforward. You go into Twin Moons. It's a Godsend ability in Dream State. Dream State's very nice, but Balance of Power, or Nature's Balance, whatever you want to call it, is, I think, a choice here. You can easily go into Wild Surges if you like, but I don't really feel like a 10% crit on your casted abilities is worth it. So I tend to stick here. It's more AP in the long run. And of course, when you start arenas and whatnot, you do get to start at 50 AP, which is just a very nice, hey, you can get in there and bang real fast. Talents just follow down, pretty straightforward. Everything just kind of amps everything. You know, Third Dot works with Waning Twilight. This, you know, when you Star Surge, they take 20% more damage from shooting stars, which is actually generally pretty nice. Outside of that, you have the choice between Wild Mushrooms and Sunseeker Mushrooms. I think if you play Wild Mushrooms, you're kind of trolling. The proc permitted on Sunseeker Mushrooms is generally very high. You'll tend to have more Sunseeker Mushrooms than you will Wild Mushrooms in a game, but it's your choice if you like the ability or you feel like you're going to be able to cleave more. You can go with it. Wild mushrooms can also be very useful for kiting, especially against double melee, because you have the choice of when they spawn. It is a pretty big slow. Outside of that, the only other big things to really pay attention to is the middle tree, Orbital Strike versus Rolling Stars. As I said, 2 charges of Incarn, very nice. Orbital Strike, though, I think does have some play. It does put your Incarn down to 2 minutes, but if you're playing Orbital Strike, I feel like you are just relying really heavily on cheese. Outside of that, standard everything from the last few years is just the Rattle the Stars, Fury of Elune, nothing's changed here. The only real deviation we've had in talent trees is we don't take Power of Goldrin anymore, and I forgot I was in a solo shuffle. Power of Goldrin, it has been cut to the core. It is terrible now. You're lucky to hit 200k crits with it. It's terrible. Don't ever take it if you have a choice, even though it's only 1 talent point. We do take 2 points in Balance of All Things, as 20% crit is very nice. Follow down the Fairy Dragon trees. Fairy Dragons, they do about 120k DPS on average, so it's a nice little boon when you get them, and you can get upwards of 5 or 6 of them at a time if you're lucky, so it can really last for you. And then, of course, you just take Incarn plus Elune's Guidance. It's just standard stuff. PvP talents, we're kind of locked into 2 right now, and your third one is a choice, but the third one isn't really a choice. So Owlkin Adept is just baseline. I mean, just having a nice free faster cast clone and root is very nice. You can get rid of this if you want. It's not really like required, but Tireless Pursuit would probably be what you replace it with. I remember as well, High Winds was gutted. It just increases range by 5 yards rather than gives you the MS that it used to have. Second talent obviously is going to be Moonkin Aura. 6% spell critical strike chance is just amazing. When you're bursting, it just hits really hard. And as for your last talent, this is where you get the flex talent. You have Moon and Stars, which is just very nice if you're having struggles juking people, because you can just tank a kick and then just cast 2 seconds later. It's really nice. I tend to play this into pretty much anything that has 2 kicks. But that's very few comps do not have 2 kicks. The rare exception where I won't play it into something like that is against maybe like Thundercleave, where I will play Celestial Guardian. And that's just because the Ellie does so much damage that you need Celestial Guardian. You need the 10% magic reduction on the goes, because if you don't, you will get Earthshocked 4 times for 2.5 million each and just die. Outside of that, obviously you can choose between Fairy Swarm and Thorns. Thorns sucks in my opinion. Fairy Swarm is obviously just really bad because you just be dispelled. It's depressing. And then there's only 2 other talent points that you would ever go, and it's Deep Roots or Dying Stars. Dying Stars, it's very specific if you're playing a very specific talent build and you're playing for Starfall. I wouldn't recommend it unless every other talent sucks here. Deep Roots is a Druid kill comp. Druids tend to not like to shift, Resto Druids specifically, do not like to shift roots, so having Deep Roots, you can just cheese them really, because you can do like a Stormbolt on healer with a beam on them, and then when the Stormbolt leaves, they think they can run, you drop Mass Entangle, and now they have to choose between shifting or healing. And generally they'll choose just to go bear form, so it keeps them locked there. And then if they come out, you just chunk them again, so it's very nice. Outside of that, we'll just go over this balance build. Its rotation is pretty simple. You prioritize your dots as always. It's Astral Generation, as per usual. You just do pretty solid damage overall. I mean, everything happens. Your mushrooms will grow off your Sunfires. It's very nice. You keep it up if you're on 3 targets. You know, you can just Sunfire 1 and Moonfire 2. And then always cycle into Eclipse. You want to be in this Eclipse as much as you can. It's pretty straightforward. But I've had some arguments with other Boomies on how bursting works with the spec, because I tend to say you Wrath into your Force of Nature, and it will proc a Dream Burst, so it gets a little like cheese out. Other Boomies say no, you're bad and you're dumb. You shouldn't be proccing Dream Burst like that. You should be focusing Star Surges early because of your final talent. You get 8% spell damage. Per Treant up, you get 3 Treants, 24%. I disagree, but to each their own. So, pretty much your standard rotation is just keep your dots up, stay in cycle, and cast Clone. You cast Clone, keep your cycles up, build up Star Surges, go all at once. This is what your standard burst looks like though, so you Wrath once, just to be right out of your Eclipse range. Wrath, drop everything. Obviously I don't have Sunfire up here, but you just keep dumping all your AP into Star Surges. Optimally, you have all your dots up at once. Make sure you have them up when you're wrathing, because you want to wrath 4 times now, as best you can. Obviously, it doesn't always work in arenas. But, as you can see, if you look at damage now, our damage is pretty interesting. Star Surge is hitting for 1.3 million. Obviously, this is a training dummy, so versatility is not impacted this. Your Moonfires and Fury of Elune will be up there, of course. Melee from Trents does do a decent amount, but your Dream Burst is where your secret damage is. It says 647k, but in arenas, it's very likely you'll hit this for nearly 1 million pretty frequently. It's a very strong ability that I don't think people really understand how good it actually is. You know, we can keep doing this and see all the damage we do. It keeps pumping and we just keep doing damage, but the Dream Bursts are where the damage really hits. So if we look again, you know, we have Dream Bursts hitting for about the same. Star Surges are still going up 1.4 million. You're getting chains of these of at least 700k each, so you can effectively just kill somebody as a Boomy alone. We roleplay a Marksman Hunter right now, where we do a lot of damage, but we don't have much outside of it, and that's what kind of sucks. But Keeper of the Grove is pretty straightforward. The next build is actually just a little fun build. Obviously, you have to wait for talents because this game's fun. This is a full moon build. And this is something I just came up with out of complete boredom. It's as simple as it sounds. You pretty much just go anything with full moon, and you play Elune's Chosen. So Elune's Chosen I have to be very specific with. When you full moon, you drop a minor moon. And I think it's 2 minor moons specifically, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So I'll demonstrate it real quick. So when you new moon, drop a moon. And it also drops that minor moon, as you saw. Minor moon doesn't do a lot of damage, but it adds up over time, especially if you're spamming these out. Now, what makes this talent tree, I think, super good, maybe not with this build specifically, it's actually Lunar Insight. It's 20% more additional damage on your Moonfire. So, Moonfire, as you saw with the last build, is already hitting for at least 100k each. If details would ever update, I could show it, but there it is. It hits for about 40k. It sounds stupid, but this ramps up over time. The dot ticks in. But there's another talent. Let me find it for you. Here it is. Moondust. When I started playing around with Elune's Chosen, I thought a 20% slow on Moonfire was just troll. I mean, everyone else has 70% slows on their casts. Why are we only getting 20? I've learned over time that Moondust actually makes Boomy really disgusting. I've had situations where I can barely kite out melee just long enough and just out of their range because of this talent alone. Specifically because of the slow. And it keeps me alive and we win games off it. For comps like Owl Play, it actually is surprisingly good. The 20% slow can keep them just enough in range for the Shadow Priest and you to actually kill them. It's really crazy how much a 20% slow changes the game. And I haven't been able to confirm it yet because it's actually very difficult to figure this out. I'm pretty sure the slow does stack with other slows in the game. So like Boomy Rogue, for instance, where you have the crippling poison on it, I do believe Moonfire slow stacks with it. It's very nice. But there's a few talents in here that you want to keep in mind of. I'm actually going to turn this music off while I talk because it's getting annoying. So, Glistening Fur is whatever. Very few arcane mages around, so it's not really too big, and I don't really think the arcane damage reduction is going to save you. The other magic damage taken reduction is nice. 3% does help a lot, of course. I think, you know, if you're going to be honest with it, Protective Growth is going to just be better in flat games, but this has some viability since you can just be immune conform. Lunar Amplification is pretty straightforward. If you cast Wrath or Sunfire, you get this buff here. Increases the damage of your next arcane ability by 9%, so it's 9% harder. It's very nice. It's very similar to Dragonflight Season 1, where we were ramping our Warrior of Balloons up. It's very fun, in my opinion. You don't optimize it too much just because it's not really worth your effort. You don't want to cast Wrath with this build, but that is what it is. Then we have Arcane Affinity. All arcane damage you deal is increased by 3%, pretty straightforward. And then Lunar Calling is what we play here. You have Stellar Command is what we play here for this specific build, and it just increases full moon damage by 25%. This does affect new moon and half moon, by the way. You can play Lunar Calling, I'll go over that later, but for this build specifically, we want to just maximize full moon damage. And then you have the choice between Light of Elune or Astral Insight. Light of Elune's not really good if you're not playing for Fury of Elunes, so we just go Astral Insight, and this just increases arcane damage by another 10%. It's very nice. And then, of course, your capstone is Eternal Moon, so you just do Minor Moon. I've hit 4.5 million full moons, just so we are clear. It's very nice. So this is all your rotation is. You just put your dots up, pump out Star Surges, and then when you have the time to cast it, you go for a full moon. And of course, with your capstone here, you do get a second full moon when you cast it. So as you can see, we do hit pretty hard. 3.2 million full moon. And that was me not really optimizing the damage. I'm sure you could do some like optimal stuff, like triple Wrath into a new moon. You know, that hits for 1.3 million. Like, that's a pretty ridiculous number for a 0.5 second cast time. It's a little cheese, of course. If you get locked out on any of the moon casts, you do get astral locked, so you're just kind of AFK for however long you're kicked out. It's more of a fun build. I think it's more viability in RBGs and Battleground bits than anything else, but there's viability here, to put it simply. It's a weird build. It was just something I kind of wanted to do on my own because I was bored, but I do wish a 5 to 10% buff on full moon, and this build probably takes over the game because, as you saw, 3.5 million almost full moon, and I wasn't really paying attention, was a pretty high number. This build does. I've worked around with it a little bit. You can do a few things talent-wise. You can take money out of Warrior of Elune. You can put it into Waning Twilight. You can go into Umbral Embrace, but if you're doing that, you are playing really heavily into Lunar Amplification, and I think it's just not worth it, because now it's another cast that if you get locked out on, it really screws you. Denizen of the Dream is also okay, but I think if you're playing this build, you're playing for the cheese, you're not playing for anything else. So I would just stick to Warrior of Elune for now. But now we go on to the third and final talent tree. This is my super fun talent. I love this build like it's no one's business. I think it's the best build in all content outside of comps like Boomy Rogue and Boomy Demon Hunter. So I'm going to say this as easily as I can. The only changes between the full moon build and this build is that we actually play a lot more for dots. So we go into Wild Surges here. We do not play Waning Twilight, even though I am playing triple dots. We do not take Denizens of the Dream, but we do take Sundered Firmament. There was a time where I was playing with Hail of Stars and Touch of the Cosmos, but I've realized those are actually really bad. And of course we play Fury of Elune, Radiant Moonlight, simple standard stuff, you know, double Incarn, there's nothing crazy here, Warrior of Elune. But the difference is now is that while we do still play Elune's Chosen, we take the entire other choice nodes outside of the 20% slow. So in this case, we take Lunation. So it's pretty simple. When you do any arcane damage from abilities, not from just damage itself, you reduce your Fury of Elune by 2 seconds. And I have to recall, but I believe it is a 50% nerf in PvP, so 1 second. And then you take Light of Elune. Moonfire has a chance to make a Fury of Elune follow for 3 seconds. Sounds bad on paper, but I'll get over to the specifics here. And then, of course, we take Lunar Calling, which makes your Starfire deal 100% more damage to primary target, but no longer are you able to go into a Solar Eclipse. This is nerfed in PvP, so I think it's 63%, I think. But this is the talent we want here, is the Light of Elune, where it has a chance to call down a Fury. So, when a Fury of Elune ends in this tree, it blows up. Pretty simple. Astral damage, so it procs off of your Mastery. And now with your Capstone, it's increased by 50%. So we'll target all these dummies. We'll just put a Sunfire out, get some Moonfires going. We'll see what's going on here. And we're just not going to do anything. Just let's see. There's a Fury of Elune already. You also take 6% more damage because of atmospheric exposure when they're hit by a Fury of Elune, so you can just keep ramping this up. And the whole rotation with this build is quite literally just get as many out as you can. So this is how you optimally do it. You're just trying to get as much arcane damage out as you can, because as you can see, my Fury of Elune's almost back already. It's halfway down off the cooldown. And it just keeps ramping. You see just non-stop Fury of Elunes going on here. And I'm about to get into another Fury. It just pretty much was used. And you're just going to keep cranking. So on 5 targets, I'm only doing 2 million DPS. Nothing crazy, but these are all stacked, obviously, so there's a bit of a discrepancy. In 3s, there are comps that abuse us really well. As I've said, Owl plays really good with this comp. That's with Shadow Priest. And you can just keep cycling these Furies, and it just keeps blowing up, blowing up, blowing up. It's a very interesting build. So this is where 20% slow comes in, obviously. If they're having to kite from you, those Furies will keep proccing, those Furies will keep blowing up, and those Furies will keep ramping your damage, which gives you more AP, which gives you more Star Surges, which gives you less cooldown of Furies, which is just a rotating cycle of just Moonfire. So your priority with this build is quite literally just to keep Moonfire up non-stop. Sunfire you obviously want to keep up, but you want to press it as little as you can. You just want to keep rotating your Fury of Elune casts and stuff. You want to get as many out as possible. So if we go to those dummies again, is this one correct? Yes. It's going to be weird numbers, obviously, as it's 5 stacks, but shift again, of course. We'll look at the numbers. So your Star Surges are still hitting for 1.4 million. There's no difference here. It's still hitting as hard as your Keeper of the Grove Star Surge. Your Moonfires, 100Ks. Fury of Elunes, 144 ticks. Starfires, 1 million. I have hit Starfires in arenas as high as 2.5 million with this build. It kind of requires the stars to align, but it can hit that high, and it's fucking fun. And then Boundless Moonlight, which is the explosion from your Fury of Elunes. As you can see, it capped out at about 1 million each. So you can imagine if you proc about 4 of these all at once and they all just blow up, you can just cheese somebody. It can be a lot of random burst. It's very nice. It's not ever going to be your top damage. I'm sure I can find an arena I played recently with it, maybe? Maybe not, actually. But this can cheese people a lot better than Force of Nature Keeper of the Groves can. It's a very fun build. I actually recommend it. This is, in my opinion, the best BGB builds, the best RBG build. This build does amazing into BM Hunters. It actually surprisingly farms BM Hunters, which is crazy to say right now because they're so broken. It's really good into Cleaves. It's really good for any wizard comps you want to play as a Boomy. Into Wizards, it's hit or miss, but I think that the unreliability of it can curse you, but it also is harder for the enemy team to predict your goes because you can just have a random go without any stuns or anything happening, so you just force a cooldown effectively randomly. This build I do think is super slept on. I really hope people pick it up because this is a lot of fun to play, and it actually changes up the dynamics of the arena really well. Talents stay the same, it's nothing crazy. Boomy by itself is actually really good right now. I don't really have much more to say about it because it's pretty straightforward. If there's any questions, you can just ask. Otherwise, we are good to go.